live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, welcome everybody to episode number 174 of Sports Cards Live. It is a special episode on Friday night, February the 17th, 2023. My name is Jeremy Lee. I would like to thank Adam Gray and Karn Rye for joining me last night for the PWCC Premier Auction All Access Extended Bidding Watch Party. That was an especially fun episode last night. If you want to go check it out, you still can. It is on the YouTube channel. I want to let you all know that tomorrow night on Sports Cards Live, another episode, our guest will be Matthew Rocker. He is a person who just made a trade at the Burbank Card Show last weekend for the number one most iconic card in our hobby, a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. He's going to tell that story along with all the cards he gave up to get that back. On Sunday at 4:30 Eastern, we will be having the LCG Auctions winter premiere, the pop culture auction. First time we're doing it. Very excited about that. Check that out, 4:30 Eastern on Sunday. And then later that night at 9:30 Eastern, we will be doing the PWCC weekly hockey auction extended bidding watch party. That'll be, I think, the fourth or fifth time we've done that. And then finally on Monday on the channel, Collectible Live, we will have our guest, Vincent Zerzolo. He is all things comics expert from Metropolis Comics and Comic Connect. So lots of content coming up on the channel. I want to ask you to please join the 300,000 plus people who've already downloaded the Center Stage app across both iOS and Android for quick comps when you're at a show or to help you price your cards for sale on any platform. Check out their collections and albums features too. They're always innovating. I saw a new announcement today for another feature. They just added text search as well. So please join me in supporting the great team they have there and the innovation they are undertaking. Also, new one, be sure to check out hobbynewsdaily.com for your daily dose of hobby news and entertaining content. It's a collaboration of various content creators, original writers, and it will be launching on April 1st. I also want to thank everybody who stopped by the tag grading booth at the Burbank show last weekend. Very grateful to the hobby for the success we had there. Thank you, everybody, so much for that. And finally, thanks to all of our loyal viewers, listeners, chat people who engage in the chat. You all know who you are. We had a great night last night, by the way. Thank you, everyone, for that, for your continued viewership and listening. And if you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please take a moment and do so. We are going to get to tonight's guest right now. He started in the hobby in 1989, 1990 after his dad took him and a friend to a card show in New Orleans, and they went on to collect together. He started LCG Auctions in early 2021. His favorite teams are the bad boy Detroit Pistons, the New Orleans Pelicans, the New Orleans Saints, and the LSU Tigers. And his favorite athletes are Pete Maravich and Isaiah Thomas. He's originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, currently hailing out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Let's bring him out. Mark Monterro, welcome to Sports Cards Live, and how are you today?
What an introduction. Thank you. I've been looking forward to our talk.
Well, you're welcome, Mark. I've been looking forward to this as well. We've gotten to know each other a little bit over the last few weeks, I would say. And, what I love about what you're doing, Mark, first of all, is that, you're a diehard sports card collector like myself, but you also have an affinity for pop culture, and I pulled these out, Mark, Star Wars figures. Here's my original C3PO. I gotta show you these. Here's my R2D2. And of course, my favorite from the early Star Wars movies is Greedo. So I wanted to show you those because I kept these in the packages. These aren't the originals from the 80s. These are from like 90. Oh, this is from 96. This is from 97. But I love these things. And that's what I like, is that you're diverse in your collecting. And I feel like I am too. I have a lot of different interests. So it's and then you started LCG Auctions. So you've turned one of your hobbies into a business. We're going to talk about that. And of course, on Sunday, we're going to cover the extended bidding period of that live. So with all that said and sort of out of the way, I'm excited to have you, but I want to dive in and talk about your history in the hobby. And but I want to cover both hobbies. I want to cover sports cards and pop culture. But let's start with Star Wars. I mentioned in the intro that you got started in the late '80s, but why don't you give us some more a fuller story and background on your hobby history?
Yeah, so I started when I was just a kid, probably late '88 or early '89, because Upper Deck had not come out yet. I remember when Upper Deck came out, buying the box with the 700 cards. So that wasn't out yet, but it started when a friend of mine was into it, introduced me, and we were both kind of into it a little bit. And he came over for the weekend, and my dad took both of us to a card show in New Orleans. And we were at that time into the Greg Jeffries card, and Jose Canseco and McGuire were big. The A's were in the World Series every year. We were into those players. And I remember going to the card show and looking forward to buying the grab bag, the $5 mystery bag where you don't know what's going to be in it. And as kids, we look forward to that. But my dad, I remember going to that card show kind of gave him the bug, because when he was a kid in the 50s and 60s, he collected. They used to put him in their bike spokes and whatever, but he was a big Mickey Mantle guy, and the Yankees were in the World Series every year. And that's who he liked. But at that card show, I remember going to a table, and a dealer had just a bunch of Michael Jordan Fleer rookies, like fanned them out. There was like 10 of them. And I remember my dad picking out the best condition copy, looking it over. It was $200 or $300 at the time. He bought that. So the Jordan was his first card. And that kind of gave him the bug to start buying Mickey Mantles. And so there was a card shop in town called Frank's. And I mean, the industry must have been booming, because there were 7 Frank's baseball cards in the New Orleans area shops. So maybe like once a week, he would come with something new, a 57 tops mantle, 58. Finally, he got the 52 tops. It wasn't in great condition, but back then there was no grading. So it was interesting to see that evolve. He would collect Mantle. I would collect Jose Canseco. And we started going to card shows in Houston. They had the TriStar shows. They'd have all the autographed guests. And that would be something that we would do twice a year. We'd go to the ball games while we were in Houston. And it was just a lot of fun. It was a good father-son experience, and very grateful that I had that time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, one thing that stuck out to me there is that your father was onto the GOATs early, like right out of the gate. Jordan, Mantle. I mean, he didn't mess around. I have to ask, that 52 tops Mickey Mantle, which is a particular interest to me this weekend, because tomorrow, as I mentioned in the intro, we're going to have another guest who just traded for a beautiful copy at Burbank. But do you or your father still have that original Mantle card?
No, he's sold. In fact, he had all the regular issue Mantles, but we would have the baseball almanac, or I guess the annual is what it was called. And it would be like Post Serial, Stallmeyer, all the oddball issues. And that's what he was going after, everything. He never acquired every single Mantle in the annual. It was quite an undertaking, especially in the early 90s without the internet and whatever. But he got close. But eventually, I think in 95 or 96, he sold his collection through Sports Collectors Digest by running an ad. And a physician, I believe in Alabama, purchased the entire thing. And he actually did really well. If you were to sell it today, because of grading and how that affects the pricing, I don't think he would have done too well on it. Because he paid a lot. But we used to go to the shows. I mean, every baseball player was there. Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio would be there, always in a suit. Ricky Henderson was, I think he won MVP in 90 or 91. He would be there, but everybody. And I actually have a photo of my dad and I. I don't know if you can see it, but with Mickey Mantle and his girlfriend agent Greer Johnson, and that's in the early 90s.
You were that little guy there You were the little guy who could barely see over the table.
Yeah, I'm handing the ball. But yeah, I had an early start, I guess, going to shows and seeing how deals were done. I remember Mr. Mint, Al Rosen, and kind of how he handled people and his setup. I remember all of that. They had the National 1 year in Houston. I remember going to that. And so I got like a taste because my dad was doing it as an adult. So as a kid, I kind of like saw that. And I always wanted, we would get the Sports Collectors Digest and they would run the auctions in the SCD. And I always wanted the game worn stuff, like always the trophies, the memorabilia, the stuff that was like, to me, really special. But of course, as a kid, like you can never afford it or get it, but you dream of having that stuff one day.
Okay. Mark, are you there? Can you hear me?
I'm here. I can hear you.
My whole internet just went down in my house there for a short moment. Well, a very long and uncomfortable moment, but okay. I think we're back. I see Sean says, Mark, just take over. Thanks guys for helping Mark out. Yes, you lost me. That was no good. I'm sorry about that. And I don't know how long
just me. They had just me.
I know. Well, thank you for holding down the show for me there. Let's just pick up where we left off. So you were talking about the mantle card, and I'll let you pick up where you were.
Yeah, I think they probably heard that I got to see a lot of deals being done as a kid, the adults doing the deals and kind of how the dealers operate and things like that. And I always wanted the memorabilia. I had said, never got it, but as an adult, the first time you get your paycheck, man, the stuff I went after was the stuff I could never get as a kid. I bought arcades. I bought different Michael Jordan game worn shoes. I bought just a bunch of stuff that I never had as a kid.
Okay, well, that's it's pretty cool that you got your start with your dad. You had the mantle. He had the mantle to Jordan. I think that's it's a good story, and it's nice that you have that history to bring you to where you are now. But I want to fill in the gap in between. So there you are, as you're a kid. You go with your dad. You showed us the picture with Mickey Mantle, and but have you been sort of collecting in the hobby all the way through from those early days in the early 90s right through till now? Like, and when did you start to get more serious about sports cards and pick up some, nice pieces along the way, some like investment type caliber pieces?
So I collected as a kid until about 96, 97 through Iverson's rookie year. And I had to have stopped then because I don't remember PMGs. I don't remember a lot of the serial numbered stuff. And just recently, I've had to learn that because it's not stuff I remember. Everything before that, I remember the Upper Deck game jerseys were huge. I remember all the stuff before that. So that's probably when I stopped. And it was like no one was collecting cards at that time for my age. And even at shows, when Reggie Bush was signed with the Saints in 2006, my wife and I went to Houston to a show to get his autograph. And it was so different than it was 10, 12, 13 years ago. I mean, the interest was, it wasn't even comparable. And I didn't think anybody was really collecting, and I didn't have an interest in cards. But I picked up again, maybe 2006, 7, 8, buying memorabilia pieces that were in the $1,500 to $3,000 range, just stuff I liked. And at that time, you could get Michael Jordan game worn shoes for about $1,500. Yeah. And I started a business in 2007, sold it in 2010. And at that point, I had enough money to buy bigger items. And when I was able to buy those more expensive items, I then, I guess, was connected to a different group that I could buy and sell to. I started to kind of form a network. And for the last 13 years, I was just buying and selling privately and making a living off of that. But I've had some really, really cool stuff. Saints Super Bowl rings, Michael Jordan photo match game worn jersey, and just really kind of cool stories to go along with how I got these. I mean, you got to hustle to get stuff at a discount, and it's fun. It's like a treasure hunt.
It is like a treasure hunt, especially when you're looking for, really unique game worn memorabilia pieces. I mean, cards, you can often find a second copy unless it's truly a one-of-one or a very, very rare card. But when you're talking about treasure hunting for memorabilia or a certain piece from a certain game that a certain player wore when they accomplished this or that, that's definitely a treasure hunt. I want to say hello to some of the people in the crowd. Contender Sports Cards on Instagram. Welcome, as always. Jake, good to see you. Vintage Card Collector says, this should be interesting. Checking in because I'm a big Star Wars fan. You know what, Mark, I had a feeling that there's probably a lot of people in the sports card space who are sort of crossover collectors. We like other genres, not just sports cards. And I think we see that right here with vintage. We see that right here with Jake's a Star Wars fan and collector as well. Todd McDonald loves the show theme tonight. Thanks for that, Todd, and be sure to check in with us on Sunday when we go through the auction. Okay, so we lost Jeremy. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Sean from Victory Investments dubs you the new host, so I might need to call on you once in a while there, Mark. Thank you for being there. Todd, let you know you're still there. Mark, just take over. Keep talking, Mark. We're still here. Thanks, guys, for supporting Mark while I was out of the loop there. And Basketball Card Nerd in the house. Good to see you. I was on the Basketball Card Nerds podcast and show on YouTube a couple weeks ago, so be sure to check that out. So, Mark, I want to take me back because, in talking to you before, you mentioned that, you remember the first Beckett magazines coming out, and I do too. And this is I should ask this question to more guests, because especially guests who were in the hobby in that very late 80s, early 90s. In the early 90s, in like 1990, you had, I believe, the first Beckett hockey, the first Beckett football, the first Beckett basketball. I think baseball came out, in the mid 80s. But when you first saw those price guides that really, put a value to these things that you had a few of, what did that mean to you? What did that say to you when you saw your first Beckett magazine?
It was just fun to follow it month to month. I mean, it was a way to kind of build a checklist toward what you're going to collect, what's out there. It gave you an idea of what's out there. And I used to like going to the back of the Beckett's and seeing the back issues and seeing the sold out. Like, there were certain issues that were sold out, obviously, like 1 through 4 were sold out. I always wanted an 88 Canseco issue, and that was sold out. So I used to collect the Beckett back issues too. I wasn't just into cards. I was into all kind of stuff.
Yeah, for me, the first time the Beckett hockey came out, and here I was, in probably 1980. Well, I guess it would have been when it came out, but I remembered I had all my sets from the 80s, and all of a sudden they were worth something, and that kind of was a pivotal moment in the hobby. I think for most of us back then, we were just wanting to complete sets as collectors, and all of a sudden there's this like monthly stock market sort of report that came out telling you what these things were worth. And I never thought of it before as being worth anything. It was all sentimental. And we've never really looked back from that time. We still collect for the sake of collecting, but there's always that monetary value associated with it. And now it's those monetary values have just gone pretty nuts. Even today, even now in February 2023, there's still some big values. Just last night on the PWCC Premier Auction, I think we had 18 items that sold for $100,000 or more, and one item hit $500,000. So hobby's pretty healthy, and I think we can all trace it back to those first Beckett magazines in the 80s and early 90s. So I wanted to ask you now. Let's just kind of move it over into the pop culture side of things. Give us a bit of your history in collecting pop culture. What was the first sort of item or genre or theme that you really loved? And take us through that, your experience in pop culture collecting.
So, I mean, as a kid, that was my first, I don't know if you want to call it a collectible, but my first memory of an item was He-Man, Masters of the Universe, getting that for Christmas. I'll show you something in a minute. That I remembered as a kid, and I got it back as an adult. But the toys were just a big part of our life growing up, and the Nintendo games, and then the cards. It kind of all flowed. I never collected pop culture things, and they weren't on my radar really at all. And one day, my brother brought home a GI Joe or something, and it got me kind of like, I remember this. Let me go on eBay and look into this. And oh, wow, they have them like in the package that you can like brand new. That's how it looked. And that was so cool to like go back and imagine what they looked like at the store and what was on the front and what was on the back and just how it came. That really piqued my interest. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I had to have one. And I got on there and bought a GI Joe Snake Eyes action figure on eBay. Didn't know what I was looking at. It was graded. I didn't know anything about the grading company. I think it was around $3,000. And I was like, well, this will be my only one. And, and I'll suck it up and just buy it. But that, led me to getting into it and, joining some Facebook groups and meeting some people and getting more and more into it. And I just learned like more and more. And then it was like, well, let me get just one transformer. And then it was like, well, let me get 5 to complete this set of 5. And it just kind of kept growing from there. And it was like about a year of a learning experience to figure it out, to get the grading down. A company called AFA does the grading, and similar to BGS, they assign subgrades. So they do 3 subgrades and then an overall grade. And the grading is it's up to 100, but an 85 is actually equivalent, I would say, to a 9.5. So an 85 is a really high grade. But yeah, I learned, and I was embraced by a lot of collectors. They were super nice to me. Like I owe them everything for accepting me and teaching me and bringing me in. So I'm used to every quarter, every whatever, getting an auction catalog. That's where all the good stuff, collecting memorabilia, that's what I would look forward to. The Heritage Auction catalog, or the Gray Flannel catalog, or the Golden catalog. I remember when Golden started in 2012. Right off the bat, the Michael Jordan jerseys, they were $6,500 to $8,000 all day. And the first Golden auction, one went for 20. And I was like, whoa, what's this? And I remember reading they did something like 800,000 their first year. And look at them now. I just remember, and he was a hustler. He was accessible on the cell phone, and he would always look out for his consigners, and it's amazing to see the growth. But I noticed in toys, there was nothing like that. I wanted like good premium items, and there was no marketplace to look forward to. eBay was really it. And eBay was a mix of kind of, I don't want to call it junk, but like you would really have to sort through. I wanted something that you could look forward to, and all the good stuff would be there. And there was just a need in the marketplace for that. And it's like, well, let's create it. So that's how LCG became.
And that brings us all the way to LCG then, to when you started the company there. You mentioned all these auction catalogs, Robert Edwards, REA, and the Memory Lane auction catalogs are two that I actually like. Right now where I'm sitting, I've got my monitor here, and then I got my laptop right over here that I use for the show and other things. Because I'm tall, it's actually propped up on about like 12 different auction catalogs. That's what I use, and I can always pull them out. They're right here on my desk. That's where they sit. So I love looking at those catalogs as well. As far as card catalogs go, but you were talking about more I think you were speaking more towards, or were you, the pop culture and that sort of thing, or were you actually talking about sports memorabilia?
I was talking about sports memorabilia. That's what I was familiar with in collecting, is the auction catalogs I would look forward to, because that's where all the game-worn jerseys were. They weren't on eBay. Collectors like myself knew the way to sell those things is through the auction companies. That's where the buyers were, and that's how we would make the most money.
So you started LCG sort of thinking about what you were seeing in sports cards and memorabilia because there was a void in the space. Is it fair to say that there wasn't anyone who was just focusing on what LCG is now focusing on?
I remember it took me months to figure out one company that offered quality action figures. And I was like, it really shouldn't take me that long. Like, yeah. I'm savvy enough in collectibles where I should have found this a long time ago. And it was because there were 20 pages out of 150 that had the type of stuff that we offer, the toys, and it was just buried. And I was like, well, why don't we just create a focused auction on this and make it very niche and focused? And yeah, it was a need that I think we've done well with so far.
Yeah. So the auction that's coming up that is ending on Sunday, this is your 2023 winter premiere auction. What auction number is this for LCG? Just to give us an idea. I know I said in the intro you started it in early 2021. So which auction would this be? We've
been doing 2 a year. 2 premieres a year. This year we're going to shoot for 3, but it's always dependent on the sourcing the material. I mean, this stuff is pretty scarce. But we're going to shoot for 3 this year. We've had a great response from collectors, and hopefully we can pull that off. But this is I believe our 5th auction.
And, I've looked at it ever since we started talking, and, just to let the audience know, you approached me, you knew what I was doing with PWCC, and you approached me and said, you know what, it'd be fun to do a similar show for what we're doing. And I looked at the auction, and I was right away, I was like, let's do this. Like, I love this stuff. And so I've counted the lot. There's about 230 lots or so in the auction that's ending on Sunday. Is that an ideal number of lots for an auction for you? You said like this stuff is scarce, so you almost have to save it up in order for it to be worthy of having a full auction. What is the optimal number of lots for an LCG auction?
So that's something that we've had to learn along the way. We were very careful with the first auction not to offer too much stuff, but to offer quality items and kind of see how it goes from there. So I think the first auction was around 100 items, maybe a little more. And I mean, we were confident that we had a good plan in place, but you don't know for sure until it happens. And we just had a tremendous response, a great turnout, and we were able to build from there and build quite well. But it's very important that we don't flood the market with this type of material. We have to kind of build along with our our audience and our buyers, because if we're reckless in how we put this on, it could have an effect on the market.
Yeah, for sure. It's twice a year is so infrequent that you're not going to flood the market with items, and I think that's a pretty good thing. I want to ask you about niche auction houses, because yours, LCG, is definitely a niche auction house. I have a friend named Josh who recently launched what he's calling 90s auctions, and he's doing 90s sports cards. So, there's a lot of sports card auction houses, but he's the only one, I think, that is literally only doing 90s cards. What are your thoughts? Like, you obviously have experience with a niche auction house now. What are your thoughts on the niche auction space? Is it something that you think we'll see more and more new entrants come into the various hobbies offering more specific items, or do you think that that we'll see more and more of the the heritages that just sell everything?
So Josh is a mutual friend of ours. I love his niche. By the way, he's been super good to me. And I actually turned him on to the software that he's using, Create Auction, which is fabulous. It's used by Memory Lane, Robert Edwards, Leland's, LCG, and now Josh is using it with 90s auctions, and he loves it. But I think it definitely has its place. Like for me, I'm a mostly 90s card collector myself. So I'm very much looking forward to his items, and it looks like he's sourcing things that you don't see very often. There's so much out there, Jeremy. Like so many cards are going to auction now compared to 5 or 6 years ago. It's not comparable. And other than what Mile High, Memory Lane, and Robert Edwards, the other auction houses, including Golden, were focused on memorabilia. And now it's like it's flipped, where cards are the focus. Memorabilia is making a bit of a comeback, I will say. Mm-hmm. And game used is starting to take off, and we're seeing some good growth there. But I think there's definitely a place for the niche auction house. If you collect that type of stuff, it's something to look forward to. I'm looking forward to Josh's auction in March, and it should be fun.
5 to 6 years ago, in the traditional auction houses, being the non, and to me, I guess what I'm thinking of, in terms of sports cards, I'm thinking about like most of the ones that were not operating on eBay. So the non PWCCs, I guess. Maybe that's the only one that did at the time. They were the selection of cards. It was like exclusively vintage. You would not see modern day cards. And I believe in around 2012, Ken Golden was one of the first, of those traditional auction houses, even though he was new at the time, or Golden Auctions was new. He was like the first one to really get into the modern cards. And now all the auction houses, I believe, have a portion of modern cards in their regular auction. So the modern stuff is really caught. And by modern, I don't just mean the 90s, like what Josh Adams is doing with 90s auctions. I mean, right up to the current year. So it's kind of neat how the space has evolved to the point where you can have an auction house like REA or Memory Lane or Golden or Heritage or any of them, and they are featuring, it'd be funny to think if they didn't have modern cards in them anymore, if they only had vintage. So it's kind of neat how the hobby has evolved that way, right? Wouldn't you say?
I would say. I mean, I didn't really notice the cards until 2019-ish, 2020. I like through Heritage, through the others, I just noticed the memorabilia, and then I saw a stark change in around 2019 or 2020, where cards overtook these auction houses, and it was just so interesting to see, because in my mind, as an outsider, I thought cards were relatively dead. I mean, it was more like niche, it seemed to me. Cards were down, the other stuff was up, and I never expected it to turn, and it turned all right.
and then the pandemic happened. So and then it certainly did turn. I think from my perspective, there was a bit of a run up, the start in kind of 2017 that brought us right through. So once the pandemic happened, we were already on the upswing, or the sports card hobby was already on the upswing, and then it just went sky high, and now we're kind of coming back to a very, I think, healthy level here in early 2023. Hopefully it's a healthy level. Nahuggins says, "What's up, Mark? Love the site. I'm 99.9% into sports cards, but had to pick up an AFA 80 Optimus Prime from LCG a few months ago. Absolutely love the piece." That's got to be nice to see, right? Somebody, and Nahuggins is I've seen Nahuggins around here quite a bit. So someone who watches Sports Cards Live, into the sports card hobby, picked up an Optimus Prime from you. That's cool. No, you must like that.
Yeah, he's making me think he got the metal plates Prime, which is a super rare piece, and I think he got an excellent price on that one.
Congrats, Nahuggins, and good to see you in here. Collector's Dream, welcome to the show. So, we know sort of when you started LCG, why you started. Now, let's talk about sort of where you're at. You're shooting for 2 or 3 auctions a year, premier auctions. Do you have non-premier auctions as well?
We have not done any yet, but that may be in the works. It may be something that we try, and we'll gauge the response and go from there. But it's definitely a thought. Right now, we have the 2 to 3 premieres planned, and that's a lot, Jeremy.
And so, what are you doing to grow it? How are you? Like you said, these items are scarce. You've got an original iPhone coming out on the auction. That's one of the top items, one of the platinum lots, I believe you call them, that's coming on the platform here, or it's going to end on Sunday with all the other lots. That's pretty cool. But how do you, and you were just featured on Fox Business yesterday or the day before. You've been on CNN. You're getting a lot of media attention for these items because they are kind of cool and interesting items. Is that your best publicity? Is showing the public through the news kind of how much some of these items might be worth, so that they will then reach out and call you? And if not, or even if yes, what else are you doing to source more items so that you can have nice, robust auctions as we move forward?
I think that's part of it. We try to hit all kind of facets of who we're marketing to: the hardcore collectors, people on eBay, the general public through the national media spots. We kind of don't control that, but we have kind of good relationships, and we've done okay with that. But yeah, it's growing on its own, Jeremy, and I'll tell you this: the stuff that's purchased in our auctions is 95% by collectors, if not more. Very little kind of speculation going on. The foundation is very strong, and the rise of this stuff has been like over a 20-year period. And it hasn't like gone crazy and then tanked. We're seeing a steady rise overall. Occasionally we'll see an item that's an outlier, but it's been steady overall, and we want to continue for it to build steadily. We've had a great response of new collectors come in that see it on, whether it be CNN or Fox Business or Forbes or wherever. They check us out through seeing it in there. And we also have, our core audience, which they look forward to these sales, and, they've got to save up money, and they look forward to, they're like, what are you going to have? I'm always asked what's coming up, because I've got to prepare. So it's a lot of fun. 2 or 3 is plenty for right now. We may look into doing some, auctions, smaller auctions on the side, but that hasn't been made official yet.
Well, I got to say, I hope that by virtue of you being on the show with me here tonight, with everybody in the chat, and with us covering your auction on Sunday, I hope that, that it will expose you to a lot of the Sports Cards Live audience. And, I'm putting it on my Instagram because I think it's cool stuff. And I mean, the prices, when you compare them to sports cards, they're not, some items are very expensive. Like there's, you got $10,000-$20,000 items, but there's a lot of crossover. I think there's a lot of people that like things other than sports cards, including myself. So, people who just got here, I was showing Mark a bit earlier. I've got these three. I got to show them again, Mark, because I just love these things. I got my R2D2, my C3PO, and my Greedo original that I've had since the late 90s. And then I didn't show this one before, but this was my favorite vehicle from Star Wars, the Land Speeder. I know people like the X-Wing and the Millennium Falcon, of course, but I loved the Land Speeder. So this is, I mean, it's loose in here, but I kept the box, and this is from Toys R Us, $9.99 for a Land Speeder. I don't even know, 1995. Like, so yeah, I love this stuff, and I'm sure there's a lot of sports car people that love it too. And that's why I'm excited to do this show with you and to do the show on Sunday with you to expose more people to these awesome collectibles. Speaking of which, I want to bring up Vintage Card Collector's comment. Right. Actually, Nahuggins, first of all, said it was the Optimus Prime with the factory mailer. Does that let you know which one that was? And then Vintage Card Collector says, thoughts on the future of WWF action figures. He says he's not expecting prices to get close to Star Wars, but they do seem cheap. And I know from looking at the LCG Winter Premiere, there are some WWF figures in there. So what do you think about that particular area of interest?
So there's a super nice Hulk Hogan LJN from 1985 that is very, very hard to find in that condition. It's got a clear bubble. Most of them have really yellowed over time, and the card is exceptional. That one has not received the action that we anticipated, and right now I think that's one of the best buys in the auction. We also have the Ultimate Warrior, an AFA 85, I believe, straight 85s. For the subgrades. Yeah, you have it. I think it's right above. There's a Hogan, there's the Warrior. Yeah, first release, it's the Hasbro. That's the one that I'm most familiar with. I don't remember LJN as a kid, but the Hasbro I remember very well. And we love those as kids. I definitely identify with those. And yeah, like to Jeremy's point, you can buy some of the very best collectibles, the top collectibles, at a fraction of what you would buy, a top sports card for. If you go to the top, Jeremy, the lot number one, the Snake Eyes, it would be in the overall 11,000. That's the highest graded example of an explosion back Snake Eyes. The explosion back is the one that all the hardcore collectors want. It's super hard to find. There's only 7 graded in any grade, and 90 is the highest. There's no 95. And so you're looking at getting the very top kind of asset in the line at a relatively reasonable price, in my opinion.
And you said there's only 7 of them. How did you find this? Like, how did the person that owned it find you? Please, I'm curious.
I think this person may be a sports card collector because it came to us from a certain vault. So he bought it. I don't know when he bought it, but I was sure happy to see it. Yeah. But he consigned several items. All of them were super high quality. And that one's super hard to find in any grade. Like I said, there's only 7 that have been graded. So the 90 is exceptional.
Wow. Yeah, that's I was, G.I. Joe. I was not a G.I. Joe kid, but I was a Star Wars kid and a Transformers kid. So, but I understand, and I can understand the desire, the nostalgia associated with a figure like this. If this is the best piece, that's amazing. 1983. Here's the iPhone that I mentioned a few minutes ago. First release. It's at 18,500. I think you're expecting this to go for a little bit to a lot more. Is this like, we know there's 7 Snake Eyes GI Joe. Do we as a hobby have any idea how many of these are floating around out there?
Well, I think I would know best. We sold one in October for almost 40,000, and that sale got a ton of press. Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Rob Report, you name it, called. And that, through that, you expect just an avalanche if they're out there to get to you, because people are, oh my God, it's worth $40,000. And we didn't receive, what we thought going up to this auction. I didn't think that we would have one. And Karen came in at the last minute with the story behind hers. She was on a TV show previously and brought it on and got it appraised and everything years ago. And it was just such a cool story. And it just fell into our lap at the last minute. And we'll see what it goes for. But I can tell you that we definitely weren't flooded with factory sealed first edition iPhones. There's, in my opinion, not that many that are still sealed and still in acceptable condition.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool piece. I remember when I missed out on saving an original iPhone, but I remember when the Apple Watch came out, and I went and I thought, oh, I'm going to buy one. I'm just going to keep it in the box because I thought, maybe that's something that would be collectible down the road. I ended up opening it and wearing it for a while, so I wasn't able to hold off on that. But I thought about it back in the day. Is there a market for the first Apple Watch at this point in time?
I don't know.
Interesting.
We'll see what happens. Maybe with these iPhone sales, the other type of items, whether it be an iPad or an Apple Watch, or whatever takes off, we'll see. But I know there is a market for electronic collectibles, at least vintage. I know those, the early prototypes and whatever, they go for quite a bit of money.
I would think the first iPod, like Apple's first product, must have some value as well.
I believe Rally, or one of the fractional companies, has one, and it was valued fairly high.
I think so too. Quick hello to MLW Fishing Man. Good to see you back. This the Breaks, as I had Snake Eyes the first week it came out at Kmart back in the day. Oh, this the Breaks. That's pretty cool. Goes on to say there's probably a case of those iPhones in a warehouse in China somewhere. Could be, possibly. Luca Nation Network joins the show and says, careful with the iPhones. No way of verifying the wrapper is actual original Apple wrapper. Careful, everyone. What do you have to say to that, Mark?
I mean, I would say, how are the factory sealed video games verified? How are the factory sealed VHS without watermarks verified? There's ways to look at this. In fact, I can pull up a fake versus a real one and show the difference. In fact, VGA, or not VGA, but CGA, the AFA company, the company that grades all the toys, VGA grades the video games. They're coming out with a home electronics division that is specifically, they've announced, going to be grading the iPhones. So there is some expertise involved in authenticating these. With ours, Karen had hers since 2007, received it as a gift, took it on a television show, showed it years ago. It was appraised. She didn't sell it. I mean, there's a story behind this that checks out. So, I mean, if you're going to say you can't verify the seal on the iPhone, you're going to have to tell me why video games are getting verified and why any shrink wrap item is getting verified.
Yeah, it seems like the item that you have has provenance, and I believe you mentioned it. Was it on Antiques Roadshow or something like that?
It was on one of the syndicated shows years ago. We have the video attached to the listing, actually.
And is that video something that the eventual winner of this item is going to be able to have, or at least
have access? In fact, it's posted on YouTube on their official channel or whatever it is. So it's there to stay, I believe.
Of the show that it was on back in the
Correct.
day.
Yes.
So if I were to buy the item, when I receive the item from LCG Auctions, am I going to also receive some sort of a link or a letter that says, hey, by the way, check out this link. This is the phone that you just bought that was showcased by Karen, who's your consigner?
Well, they'll have access to the listing, obviously, that will stay on our website. But we would like to send them all the clips to the different media attention it's received so far. Forbes article, the CNN video, the Fox Business video, all of that would be super cool to have along with the item to whoever buys it.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And just again, having the story, having the provenance kind of gets you over the fact that, and let's face it, even in sports cards, there's fake 52 Topps Mickey Mantles out there. And you know what's funny, Mark, is that in sports cards, there may be counterfeits out there that we don't even know are out there. They could be in all of our collections because they're so good. So, it's like, and there's no wrapping on them to be verified. When we think about counterfeits in the sports card world, we think about known counterfeits, ones that we know are out there, or there's some telling fact. There's a tell. There has to be a tell. If there's no tell, we don't know, and we're a bunch of suckers. So this isn't, it's not like an iPhone is the only collectible asset that is susceptible to it, but it's also important that we're aware of that and that we only buy these things from a reputable auction house that does their due diligence, like LCG, as we're learning together, who is doing that and knows what they've got. I think that's pretty awesome. I wanted to and then Vintage Card Collector here says, so changing the topic for a second, how do most collectors feel about a retail pricing sticker? I think similar to this pricing sticker right here. How do they feel about retail pricing sticker, whether it's Kmart or KB Toys, on the figure card? Does having one affect the grading score? And I'm gonna take that a step further. Does it also affect the desirability of the item?
I had the same exact question when I started looking at this stuff myself. And the consensus is most of the time, the retail pricing sticker adds to the nostalgia, especially if the placement is good and it's not too big. If it's kind of placed tastefully on there, or even sometimes prominently, if it's a Toys R Us or one of these now defunct Child's World or KB Toys, a lot of collectors love to see that. And at the same time, a clean one without the sticker is very desirable too. I don't think it affects the grade at all, unless it, from an aesthetic standpoint, ruins the piece in some way.
I think it's funny because, the placement, and if you think about what was happening in the stock rooms at these stores back in the 80s, where there was just some probably minimum wage worker with a price gun just and click, one at a time, not really paying attention to where they are. Like in this case, it's almost right on Luke's head, which would not be a good thing. It's not on there, but I know this isn't sealed. This thing, I've opened this 100 times. There happens to be another price tag down there for some reason. I can open this right up and pull out my land speeder. Like there it is. Like I love this thing. It even has a bit of an action right here. It'll bring the wheels down so you can actually roll the thing on the ground. It's anyway. What this camp is an item like this worth anything where it's loose in the box and I'm sitting here handling it? Like, is this of any value?
That particular one probably is not. We haven't offered like mid-90s stuff, but we actually had, I believe, the prototype of that that was consigned by an employee that worked on designing it, and it sold for a few $1,000s, I believe. That's worth something. That one, maybe if it was a 1978 model.
It's definitely not worth a couple thousand, maybe a couple tens. But at that point, I've kept this all these years. I'm definitely not looking to move along from it. That's for sure. A Vintage Card Collector goes on to say, that's a surprising answer. I figured the sticker would decrease eye appeal. And you know what? That was my assumption as well. I can actually show you like this. Which one is it here? My C3PO right here. I went one day and tried to take the price tag off of there. I probably should have just left it as it was, or else now I got to try and remove the rest of it. What about an item like this that has a half removed price tag? Is that a bad thing?
Yes, something like that would decrease the grade, I guess, or at least from a buyer's perspective, perhaps give them pause.
Doesn't give me pause, guys. I love this piece. I love my C3PO. No pause here. No pause here. While I'm looking at my own stuff, I also dug out. It's funny. This is an old shoebox. It's an old Florsheim shoebox. I wrote Star Wars figures on this many years ago. So this, I'm just going to open it up. I can't give you a really good view of it, Mark, but this is literally filled with Star Wars figures. Even have like one of the big animals. I don't even know what he's called. You know, there's a Vader. So like, you know, it's funny in the sports card world, we always kind of joke around that, not joke around, but, you know, when we tell stories, and we're tired of telling these stories where, you know, yeah, I got a call from an old friend from high school. He says, oh, I want you to come look at my cards. You ask him, well, what are the cards? I say, oh, you know, I picked them up between 1988 and 1993. You're like, yeah, okay, please don't waste my time. Or yeah, it's probably not worth too much. So you don't worry about it. Is there a parallel in toys and pop culture items where you or other sellers will get a call from a potential consignor or customer or enthusiast who says, I've got a box full of figures from when I was a kid, and it literally looks like this. Is this the same thing as your 90s junk wax cards, or is there any value to, you know, a bunch of like stormtroopers and, you know, Imperial guards? I had a bunch of these. I used to set up little displays on my on a shelf in my old house. You know, look, I got my Obi-Wan he's still holding the lightsaber even in the box here. And of course, oh, sorry, Mark, I'm just geeking out here, but my Greedo and my Boba Fett, like, it doesn't get any better than these.
It's fun. Just like cards, it depends on what you have exactly. You know, if you have a 1978 through 1985 figure, maybe, and it's in great condition, it may be something that has some value to it. If it's beat up and the arms are torn off, or if it's from 1995, it's likely going to have a lot less value.
So 95, which is what all my stuff is, because I had the original stuff as a kid in the early 80s, but I don't anymore. Those got sold off in a garage sale long ago. But this stuff from 1995, this is the similar the similar type product to the early 90s sports cards. Is that what you're telling me? This is all just for fun, or I got to just donate them to a children's hospital?
Right. So those are the 90s, and the others are compared to like the cards in the 50s.
Yeah. You know what's funny though is that I still love these things. Like I'm keeping these forever as far as I'm concerned. And now, you know, coming across LCG and talking to you, like, and I'm looking at the auction, like it's very compelling. I find it very interesting. I just, you know, I don't know a lot about it. So let me ask you this, because I have a feeling that there's some people watching or that will watch or listen to this in the next couple of days, even before the end of your auction, which is coming up on Sunday, which we will be covering live. Is there a fast education? Is there something that you could share with the audience if they are interested? Like, because I want to go in and I want to bid on some items in the auction. There's a lot of stuff I like there. But there's going to be some people who say, well, I don't know enough about it. Even last night on the PWCC sports card auction, there was a Ty Cobb I discovered for the first time, and I wanted to buy it, but it was a lot of money. And I said, I have to study this. I'd never seen the card before. I have to learn about this card first before I go dump a bunch of money into it. Even as a collectible, it's a lot of money. It's significant. When you spend that much money, it is somewhat of an investment. The same thing I would apply that same outlook on pop culture collectibles and say, I need to learn more. So I know that between Transformers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Masters of the Universe and Star Wars, et cetera, there's going to be different important things you need to know. But is there any sort of blanket 2-minute statement you can make to help people kind of fast track an education? Maybe that's a lot to ask, but I'll put it out there.
Yeah, I think the best way to learn about this type of stuff or any collectible is through experience, but you can kind of fast track your experience because of all the tools that we have now. You can go back. First of all, you can read the descriptions of the items and see what's highlighted there, what's important about each one, and that you get that idea in your head. And then you can go back and look at our past auctions from a pricing standpoint, what those items have sold for in the past, or an item similar has sold for in the past. So you get a general idea of what these things go for.
That'll be helpful. Sorry, I just had to do this. The Cantina band. Remember these? I was a member of the Star Wars fan club in the, I guess in the 90s or even the early 2000s. And, every so often they'd have like only for mail-in, and you'd get them in just a plain white box. And I would open these things up and put them on my shelf. Is there a market for that type of item that you could only get by I don't even know what I was a member of, but I would get the Star Wars Insider magazine, I think it was called, and send away. And and there's a fifth one of these. They came with all the instruments, which are loose in that box somewhere. But is that collectible, even though it's not from the early 80s or late 70s?
I mean, there's a lot of like mail-in type items that are very collectible. It depends on what it is exactly.
Yeah. So the Cantina band.
I don't know much about that, so I'm not going to speak to it.
And speaking of that, so Dennis Hall works with you at LCG, and he's your resident Star Wars expert, and he will be joining us on the show on Sunday when we're covering off the premiere and extended bidding. These questions I'm asking you, and that I'm sure other people will ask, is Dennis going to be able to answer a lot of this stuff? Does he have a deep knowledge of the history of the figures? And I kind of feel like almost like I'm asking you all these questions about my own things. And we tend to do that when we don't know a lot about something, but we have it. It happens to all of us with sports cards. Is Dennis going to be able to, and we're not going to turn it into an Antiques Roadshow episode, but is he that knowledgeable? Is he on the action figures? Is Star Wars his main area?
Yeah, Dennis will be very helpful with Star Wars and the intricacies, between the different backs of the card on each figure. He knows a lot about Star Wars, has a long track record with collecting, and has a deep knowledge base of that. Both that and Ninja Turtles is his expertise, which is interesting because Ninja Turtles came so much later, around 88, 89. But he's very knowledgeable about both of those.
I'm just going to bring this up again because I have this on my other screen. So there's a Boba Fett from 1978 Canada Star Wars Boba Fett. It's at $5,360. And there's a Ninja Turtle. There's Scratch. This is from 1993, and it's at $4,400. So let me ask you this then. Are there Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started as that Eastman and Laird comic book in the 80s, like the mid to late 80s, I believe. Are the comic book collectors collecting Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures, or is it more or less action figure collectors who are collecting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures, or is it simply both? Or do you know?
There's some, but there's also a lot of comic book collectors that collect Masters of the Universe and collect Star Wars. There is crossover. I don't know if it's one toy line more than the other, though. I can't say there. But our collector base is, a lot of them are hardcore action figure collectors. A lot of them, believe it or not, they don't collect sports cards, which I can't really relate to myself, but I think I can relate to a lot of members of your audience, where I'm a collector. Like, if I see something cool that appeals to me, that I remember, and that I can kind of find what's rare or what's desirable about it, like, it'll draw me in. And this stuff wasn't always on my radar, but when I discovered it, I thought it was really cool and was something that I dug into.
Yeah, I get that for sure. I'm going to come back to Swifty and vintage question, but first I want to bring up, we'll do T-Dot first, as this episode is bringing back my G.I. Joe days from the 80s, as it should, T-Dot, and welcome. Dave Kaplan here says, are Beanie Babies worth anything? And I think some are worth something, But my question to you on this, Mark, is, are Beanie Babies something that you will have in a future auction? Like, the princess one or whatever it might be that could be worth a couple grand. Like, your platform seems perfect for the highest, the most desirable Beanie Babies. Have you ever had any on the platform?
We haven't had any yet. We're very careful in what we bring in. If we bring something in, we're going to do it right. But it would be something that we would be open to if it were, in fact, a good fit and we had the correct marketing plan in place.
Good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Card Killer, welcome to the show, says, good evening, girls and boys. I have so much vintage Star Wars. What about the late 90s TCG Star Wars? They looked like Pokemon, but for Star Wars, I have so much. I don't know if he's talking about cards or toys. Are you talking about cards or toys? Card Killer, do you know what he's talking about, Mark?
I'm not sure.
I think it must be cards, because he mentions TCG, which is trading card games. Let him clarify. In the meantime, Swifty up here says, Mark, have you got together with Jordan Hembro to help find those tough box toys or loose ones? He's a big Star Wars collector. I'm not sure who Jordan Hembro is. Are you, and have you?
I'm not familiar either, and I have not.
Goes on to say, when I worked at Toys R Us at the warehouse would ship boxes of Star Wars picked over. The biggest two to find were the Princess Leia hologram with R2-D2 and the Boba Fett 300th anniversary. Oh yeah, those were the days. Hey, get Swifty. Vintage Card Collector says, is the Star Wars Kim Simmons Skywalker 35mm slide a one-of-a-kind, or are there others out there? And he's talking about this item right here that is on the platform, on the LCG platform, ending on Sunday. And I know, Mark, you and I have talked about this particular lot that is open. It's at $424 right now. Is this the original? Are there more? And what was this used for?
Very good question. So Dennis Hall will be talking more about this on Sunday during our live coverage. He's familiar with the Kim Simons collection, and this is one that immediately jumped out at me because when it was sent to us, it was sent as not a photo match, but I guess a resemblance to a Power of the Force carded figure. And I immediately noticed that, no, this is actually the 78 tops, which is potentially a very big deal. That's a huge card in Star Wars. So Dennis will come on Sunday and speak more to this, but that's a very exciting piece. It's an original negative of that tops card.
I mean, that to me is a staggering statement or a piece and potential to own. I mean, we talk, I've been doing some episodes recently on comic books and comic art. I have another one coming on Monday with Vincent Zerzolo, who's a comic expert. And I had Glenn Brunswick on last week from Panel Page Art. And in comic book, and you have original comic art right here as well. In comic books, original comic art is the source of what the comic books were printed from. The Luke Skywalker #1 card from the first Star Wars set, if this is the actual negative that was used to produce that card, this is a monster piece. And that's a paltry price right now. So I would expect that to be, in a mature market, which I don't know if this is or isn't. How is this not $50,000? Like seriously, because that card is so important.
Jeremy,
yeah, please.
What I used to do is, you used to get those Robert Edwards catalogs and those Mile High catalogs. I used to as well, but I wasn't a card collector. I would go in there and I would buy the memorabilia. I would find the items that kind of were off the radar. Maybe they were in an auction that doesn't cater to that type of thing. We may have one of those examples right here.
Wow. Man, I almost wish that we didn't talk about it, so I could have had a better chance at it for myself. But that's a really cool piece, man. Really just a neat item to be able to own. Just going to do a little bit of scrolling. I also, the nice thing about action figures are the cards on the back. I think they're probably as important, if not more important, along with the bubble, the plastic bubble that the action figure is in. Those get discolored a lot. I'm always looking for parallels to sports cards. It reminds me of, a faded autograph, or, a chrome or a refractor going green. When the bubble yellows, that's not a good thing, right? That's a major condition issue. And I guess I want to ask you, what are the factors or the criteria that an action figure is graded on? And let me guess, Mark. I'm guessing it's the card, the condition of the card itself, like this piece here. I'm just going to unshare for a moment the screen, but I'm guessing it's like the condition of the card itself, whether the price tag is half scratched off, and then the clarity of the bubble or the blister that the figure is in. But if the figure is inside here still, is it just assumed to be a gem mint figure? And anyway, please, I'm guessing, educate us.
So the criteria is the card, the bubble, and the figure. The card is kind of, if it's fading, points would be deducted. If there's creases, points would be deducted. Edge wear around the edges, that kind of thing would deduct points. The bubble is mostly graded on the shape of the bubble. If there's a crack, it would significantly decrease. If there was a ding or a dent, it would decrease. The color of the bubble, whether it's yellow or clear, doesn't affect the actual bubble grade. But if it's yellow, what they do, they'll assign a Y to the figure. And on certain figures, if a Y is assigned versus no Y, the pricing is much, much different. You'll see that with Masters of the Universe. Our selection, if you're not familiar, our selection is stuff you don't see. Like if you go on eBay, it's going to be flooded with yellow bubble Masters of the Universe figures. You look at our selection, it's clear bubble. It's stuff that you won't normally find. And we accept, we accept those by design. Oh, and then the figure can actually change, Jeremy. It can get discolored. It can, it can get chipped somehow. Something could happen to the actual figure, and they assign a grade on the figure as well. So a really good figure would be assigned an 85. If the figure was, let's say, Luke's white robe was maybe yellow, maybe his arms were yellow, maybe that would get a 75 instead of an 85 subgrade.
Interesting stuff. I was just looking at my Greedo as you were speaking, and I'm like, oh, that card it's minty. There's no edge issues or anything. And then I look right at the bottom corner, you can see right there, it's kind of peeling out a bit. Now, I know this isn't a valuable figure, but that kind of sucks, because I've had this thing ever since I bought it originally at probably Walmart or somewhere like that. So, but of course, I got a loose Greedo because, you sometimes you just want to put Greedo in your pocket and go grocery shopping. So, all right, let's, first of all, thank you for that explanation. Very interesting. Back to comments. Card Killer clarifies he was talking about cards, the Star Wars card game. They came in packs and you played a game with them. Every box had one hollow or so. Sucked up my allowance when I was young. There were starter boxes too. Is this in your wheelhouse, Mark, or are you clear? Are you strictly an action figure auction house and collector yourself?
It's not something that I'm personally familiar with. I'm not familiar with Pokemon either, or Magic the Gathering personally. But it's something I'm open to learning about and accepting if it's a good fit and we have the right plan in place.
Thanks for that. And there you go, Card Killer. Sorry, I couldn't give any more information. Card Killer does some amazing work. He recently took a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle and did a Darth Maul spin on it, which is really a neat collaboration. And check out the Card Killer, who's a friend of mine. Check out his Instagram page if anyone's interested in prints of that. Really cool stuff. I want to go back here, Mark, for a second to the cards, because to me, you do have, like, action figures are for a sports card collector, we have the card. Maybe you have an autograph and a piece of memorabilia. For an action figure collector, you have the card, which is bigger than a sports card, but then you have the action figure as well. The action figure is way better than just a piece of memorabilia. Maybe it isn't. I mean, that's a weird statement for me to make. It's three-dimensional. It's something that you can, kids played with. It's the whole body of the character. The action figure is really cool. You got the bubble to consider in terms of the grading, but these are, I love this Wonder Woman here. Like, this is just a beautiful, beautiful item. How important are the graphics on a card? I come down to these ones here. These ones, the cards don't interest me as much. I'm also not a wrestling guy. The colors, these colors, I love them. I love the blue and the yellow together. How important is the aesthetic of the card to the value of the figure? If that is even a reasonable question, and I'm not sure it is, but I'll put it out there.
I mean, it's whatever speaks to you. I can say that if you scroll up a little bit, Jeremy, the Lion-O, the Thundercats, those are exceptional pieces. They're pretty large compared to some others, but the quality of them is exceptional. As much as you like the superpowers, if you were to put those side by side, you'd be blown away by the Thundercats. Beautiful piece. Also, the LJN wrestling, like the Hulk Hogan at the top, that one's that's the Hasbro. Hasbro wasn't as, the quality isn't there compared to the LJN Hulk Hogan. Those cards are big. The quality is awesome. It's interesting. It's really, whatever speaks to you, but some are definitely have a feel to them of quality and value more than others do.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So you're saying LJN? Right there. Sorry, I didn't see it. LJN is right there. Okay.
Yeah, the manufacturer. Also, Jeremy, what blew me away when I first started collecting, when I bought my first, I wasn't buying, I guess I bought my first expensive piece was graded. But I bought some others that were not graded, and I had to buy cases for it because I wanted to display it. And I bought the acrylic case, and I had no idea how to put the figure in. I had to ask the guy on eBay, how do I do it? And he explained it to me. But they look tremendous from a display perspective. They're in these solid acrylic cases that can just sit on a shelf or within a display case, and they look exceptional.
Yeah. I'm so prone to being sucked into this kind of stuff because it's so cool. It's nostalgic for me, and the pieces are just beautiful. Frogger, like the Atari 2600 Frogger, $200 right now. I'm probably going to put a bid in on that one, Mark, because I had this game. The Atari 2600 was my first console. I'm probably going to go for that. VHS. Let's just talk. I got several comments here I want to get to, but I want to just talk about VHS for a second. When VHS was first on the scene about, 18 months ago or so, it feels like, the card collecting community looked down upon it. It was almost like people were making fun of it. What are they going to grade next? They're grading VHS now. Here we are. You have an auction house, and you are auctioning off some graded VHS tapes. And if we're looking at the amounts right now, Rocky's got a bid of 220, Top Gun 200. These are all, among the most important movies of all time. Raiders, Gremlins, Karate Kid, E.T., Pulp Fiction. We don't have bids on some of these yet. Meanwhile, E.T.'s up to 266. What are your, and I'm going to hold on, see what else we have. Coneheads, Child's Play, Masters of the Universe. There we go. Willow has a bid of $100. So you've got, I don't know, a dozen or so VHS collectible tapes in here. What are your thoughts on VHS collecting? Are you seeing a demand for it? Is it taking off? And what did you think when you were catching on to the narrative on Sports Card Instagram when people were kind of like poo-pooing on it? What are your thoughts?
So I wasn't part of Sports Card Instagram at that time, but I believe we had finished the first auction, and it was in the summer, and this stuff heated up like you wouldn't believe. That Return of the Jedi that we have there, we sold a copy of that for, I believe $15,000.
Wow.
I think it's the same copy or very, very close. That Mario that you see, the VGA 85, we sold a VGA 85 for $3,700. We were actually the first auction house to offer graded VHS, believe it or not.
Wow.
We were the first to offer VGA. We auctioned the first 15 VGA graded VHS tapes. So we had a lot of eyeballs. At the time, it was really hot. It also seemed very speculative. It wasn't established. Maybe people thought they could do what they did with video games with the VHS tapes. It's kind of interesting to see how it's developed. Some items or some categories are more risky than others when you think about them in terms of investment, especially something new that's not established, like the VHS. Heritage Auctions just had their signature VHS auction today. That ET, the identical ET in the identical grade, also the Pepsi promo, sold for $1,375 today. Ours is at $266. A lot of times these guys, they come in the last day and bid. So I'm expecting that. That's kind of been the pattern with VHS. But we have some really cool titles, especially if they stay in like an affordable range, just to pick up just to have something to display is super cool. Like the Pulp Fiction, that's a really rare variant. And one went today on Heritage for $1,600 plus. So there's, I think, some deals to be had, some things to keep your eye on. Again, like I don't advise like investing in this type of stuff, but if you like it and it's affordable to you, there's no problem with bidding and going for it.
Yeah, yeah, like Pulp Fiction. I used to have the movie poster in my basement back when back in the mid 90s when just before I moved out of my family home. It's neat. What is it that we're collecting? The collectors of VHS tapes. It seems to me like, yeah, you want the original item that would have been sold back in the day, and a lot of these things were in movie rental stores. So they were open, they were used over and over again, and the boxes would be looked at and handled and stuffed with foam and reheat sealed. And I worked in a video store in the late 80s, so I know all about that. I think. Are people who are collecting these and spending, good money on them, are you buying the display item? Are you buying the box that the tape is in? The tape itself could degenerate over time. Does the tape inside the box even matter? Or is it simply the packaging that the tape is in?
I don't think the tape inside matters. At least it doesn't cross my mind. And I've purchased a few expensive ones. In fact, I brought one along right here. This is a WrestleMania 6 factory sealed, super hard to find. I don't know how wide the collector base is, but I know I probably paid way too much for it. I think I paid $1,500 or something for this, but it's actually like this box is bigger than most boxes. It's called a big box. WWF Big Box. And that's what they did from WrestleMania 6 through WrestleMania 8. Super hard to find. It took me forever to get this. But it's something I like, that I saw, that I thought I could afford. And I jumped on it. And that's the way I collect. Everybody's different. I don't expect to find a buyer for double. If I were to just sell it anywhere, I'd probably lose money because I probably overpaid, which I do for the majority of stuff I like. But it's stuff that doesn't come around often, and I've got to jump on it when it shows up.
Well, I mean, I think that was Macho Man and Hulk Hogan on the cover of that. If I saw it right, yeah,
Ultimate Warrior.
I mean, still, like, what an amazing, what just a nice display. Like up there on my top shelf, I have one VHS tape. It's that one. It's that right there. That's a Timu Solani, the New Boss video. I don't know. It's hard for me to do this backwards, but there. That's, it's open as I've played it. It's a cool display. It's up there just on display because I like the subject matter. So That's pretty cool. And yeah, if you paid too much for it, but if you love it, who cares? I mean, you love it. You're gonna get sentimental value out of it, and that's something there's something to be said for that, I think. So I'm interested in the VHS area. I'm not sure it's for me, but I'm interested. And you're selling the tapes on there to people who are gonna bid on them. Some don't have bids yet, so we'll see. But I'm excited to, as we cover the extended bidding with you on Sunday, to see what happens. Let's go to a couple more comments. Jacob Dahl says, Mark, have you guys ever auctioned the rare rocket firing Boba Fett or the vinyl cape Jawa?
We have not auctioned the Boba Fett yet. We've auctioned, I believe, 2 vinyl cape Jawas. The first one went for a ridiculous price at the time. I think they were selling for around 15,000 in the grade that we sold, and we got ours went for 25,000. And then they got ridiculous after that. I think they got up to like a AFA 75, which is kind of a grade that's hard to sell sometimes for that figure. Got up all the way to 37,000, which is crazy. But those are 2 big pieces in the Star Wars line. We've sold one of the 2. A rocket firing Boba Fett would be interesting, but for a while they were popping up several times a year, which has brought the price down a bit.
That'll happen. We've seen that in the sports card world. Get Swifty says, as a comic book, sports card, and collector in general, collect what you love. Yeah, preach, Swifty, preach on that. It says, because I still kick myself of the toys, comics, and cards that are now worth a lot. I think we all have some of those thoughts and feelings, Swifty. But thanks for the comment. Vintage Card Collector wants to know, Mark, what causes the bubble to yellow? Is it light exposure or something else?
We don't know for sure. There's theories that it could be the light exposure. There's theories that it could be what the bubble is manufactured out of. There's a number of theories, but it is odd how some have, gone 40 years without yellowing, and yet the majority have.
Yeah, interesting.
But I would say, if you're buying a Babe Ruth baseball, you want to keep it, maybe in a dark room and preserve it as best you can. Same with anything that where the elements could get to it, whether it be fading or whatnot.
When I hear you make that comment about the Babe Ruth baseball, I think, yeah, but I want to show it to my friends. And then I think, yeah, so only bring it out when you have company over, and then put it back in the dark space. Don't leave and the same goes for autographed sports cards. Vintage sports cards will go get darker over time. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Nahuggins here says, I believe that's the 77 Topps Skywalker, not the 78. The auction listing, and I mean, I'm sure you or Dennis Hall will know for sure, but it says photo match is 78. So I don't know if that's something to go back and look at just to.
Jeremy, we have the PSA card. If you click on that where it's labeled, it should pull up. Is it 77? Okay, yeah. He's right. It is 77. We'll have to go back and correct that. Great catch.
Good catch. Thank you, Nahuggins. He goes on
Maybe that's why it's so low.
He goes on to say, and I just bid on, it's at 513 on the last screen. It was at 424. So there we go. We got a bid on the negative. Yeah, Nahuggins, I think you're onto something there. And I'm sorry to say that because but I find this piece very interesting myself. This is like, that's really cool. Really a cool piece, Mark. Congrats on having it on the platform. This might be the dark horse in the whole auction. Of course, the iPhone is kind of the sexy piece because it was on Fox Business yesterday and CNBC and all the or CNN. But this negative right here, this piece right here, that might be the dark horse in this whole auction. And I don't know much about it. I'm learning and I'm excited to learn. I'm excited about working with you on the LCG auction because I feel I'm going to learn a lot. And I hope my audience and the Sports Cars Live audience does as well. Get Swifty here says, Jeremy, also on that card stock Star Wars you were holding, this one here he's talking about, don't pop the clip out that holds on to the peg in the store. So I guess this right here, there is a piece here, but this, I don't know what that is. I think that was just used to firm up the cardboard so it wouldn't kind of bend and break off, if that makes any sense. Oh, the inside. The inner clip. I see what you're saying. Mark. Yeah. This is a different piece, though. Was there a piece? Did I break that out? I don't know. I think that was hanging on a slat wall sort of thing, you know? But Swifty goes on to say, investor pay more money. That goes for any action figure card stock. Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I have to say that when I got these back in the, you know, this is already, I've had these for 25 years or so. When I kind of remember pulling that price tag off, thinking, I don't want that on there. I want to see the figure through the bubble. I didn't even know what to call it back. I don't think I called it a bubble back then. And now I'm like, darn, I should have left that intact, because this one isn't coming off there. But yeah, the C3PO is pretty nice. It's minor edge wear. It's funny, edge wear. That's what we talk about on sports cards. So I like the similarities there. But thank you, Swifty, for the tip. And Huggins says, Mark, do you think demand will eventually decline for things like G.I. Joe and Transformers? Or how do you see the legacy carrying on to the next generation?
I mean, I don't think guys my age are going to go anywhere. I think, if anything, we'll have more disposable income to collect these type of things. And, you know, with G.I. Joes and Transformers, they're still like in popular culture. If I go into Target, I'll see remake Masters of the Universe on the shelves, like the vintage ones. They're like trying to bring that back. And if you go on Netflix, you're going to see Toys That Made Us, or you're going to see a documentary on this or that, or you're going to see a Kevin Smith reboot. Like, this kind of stuff is certainly in right now. And I think that we have a long way to go, because if you're like late 30s to 50, 55, you can identify with most of this stuff, and you're going to hopefully be around for a while and hopefully have more disposable income. So I don't think it's going to decline because we're dying off. I think it's here to stay.
You know, and I had another answer to this, and I'm not an expert. I'm certainly not in your business, Mark. But I think, to Nahugin's question, it's going to be sort of similar to the superhero genre, where we're seeing the movies come out. You know, you've got the Venom, you've got the Black Panther movies, bringing more interest to those comic books. Star Wars is never going to stop having more stories and more character build-outs. I can see that being the case with G.I. Joe and Transformers. Like, my son he'll be 4 years old in a couple weeks here. Today he was playing with his Optimus Prime that I'm holding. He's like, Daddy, hold the remote, and now I hold the remote, and now he walks around like a robot. Meanwhile, Optimus Prime is moving around beside him. He's almost 4 years old. That's it, and he's into Transformers already. Is that going to be nostalgic to him in 50 years or 40 years or 30 years? And he may want to go back and buy, especially with his dad being a collector like myself. Will he maybe want to go back and get originals because that's nostalgic for him? I mean, I have to think maybe, if not my son, other kids like that are going to want that stuff.
It sounds to me way more likely than say sports cards, where kids could identify with them and their parents could as well. To that generation. One thing to keep in mind with the decline is also like the number of these things. There's so few. And I think because there's so few, they're going to remain in high demand because there's a scarcity factor that's not present with other collectibles. And as more and more collectors want these things, I think that's going to lead to a rise in value, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't see it going away there. And what you said when you compared it to sports cards, and immediately my mind goes to, okay, my kid's 4 years old, in 20, 30 years when he's got some disposable income, is he going to want Michael Jordan cards? Or is he going to even want LeBron James cards, who will be long retired before my kid really gets into watching basketball? Or will he want the stars of that day? Will he want the Zion or the Luka? Because those guys are going to be retiring when he's in his mid-teens and, that sort of thing. I don't know. Then I think back to the Ty Cobb card that I saw last night on PWCC that I fell in love with on the spot. You could go back and watch. I think I was gushing over this card. And I never saw Ty Cobb play, but I love the history. And I love the pioneer, and the artwork and the way it was distributed and the text on the back. So I don't know, like these things become pop culture history, sports history, Hollywood history, rock and roll history. There's all these different genres. And, the Beatles are never going to be unknown. The Rolling Stones will never be unknown. Top Gun, Pulp Fiction, these things are going to be like, To Kill a Mockingbird. You do book reports on these things. You're film studies courses. You're looking at the originals to see the history. I don't think and now that the world has changed, there's video game courses. There's going to be pop culture courses. They're going to look at the history, the evolution. I don't think any of this stuff is ever going to go away. Maybe I'm nuts, but I really don't think so. Any of it. I think it'll always all be relevant. I think there will always be relevant pieces in all of these genres 100, 200 years from now, as long as the earth is spinning. Say something. I mean, what do you think?
I think you said it all.
All right.
We'll see what happens. I don't think in my lifetime there's going to be some decline because I think we're still young and we're still going to collect. And if anything, it grows because we'll have more income to spend on it. Hopefully.
Nahuggin says, fair enough. Would love to see a really well done G.I. Joe movie. I mean, Demi Moore and G.I. Jane. I mean, that was some good entertainment right there. But and I think that's a great comment though, because that brings interest, and then it spins off new comic books and it spins off new toys. And then the new collectors want to go back in time, just like with sports cards. A lot of people have come into the hobby since say 2015. They buy up a few of their favorite players and then they start looking back in time. And now they're going for Jordans and Wilt Chamberlains and Bill Russells, Mickey Mantles, Gordie Howes, Nolan Ryans, the list goes on and on. Jim Brown's, like it goes on and on. So I'm with Nahuggins on this. A well-done movie can do wonders for the whole genre as far as the collectibles go and the values associated. But again, you're not on here, talking about your love for this stuff. And we're talking about your auction house, LCG Auctions, and the winter premiere that's coming up on Sunday. And you said, you're not telling anybody to invest in these things. Collect what you love. And that's really the best advice any of us can give anyone, I think, when it comes to putting your money into collectibles. Vintage Card Collector says, I wonder if PSA is considering grading action figures. AFA seems to be the industry leader, but they aren't well known. PSA could give the category a huge boost. Yeah, they could. Do you know, are they looking at getting into grading action figures?
I was curious because they are grading the Funko Pops. It would take some expertise and whatnot to get that going, but let's say they entered, it could be a massive boost.
Yeah, that could be a big deal for sure. Them or other grading companies as well. And I'm with Tag Grading, working with Tag Grading, and Tag has the automated grading patents on all collectibles, including like action figures. So maybe we'll get into it in due course here as well, and give it some objective, consistent grading. We'll see. All right, Mark, listen, this has been a lot of fun. I'm really excited for Sunday to get back together with you here on Sports Cards Live. I want to invite everybody to come join us then. And if you're going to be bidding on any items, which there's two, I think I'm definitely going to put a bid up. I'm going to put some bids in on at least two things I see that I really like. But if anyone's planning to bid on anything, I want you to come and join us. And to the extent you're willing to tell us you're bidding on them, please do. Ask questions. We're going to have Dennis Hall, who is Mark's Star Wars expert, joining us. And what else is he an expert in? Is it Masters of the Universe?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I've met with Dennis. He's got a ton of Masters of the Universe hanging in his office as well. So the guy knows his stuff. So he will be able to answer more questions on that. And, if you're someone who's watching because you know Mark and you know LCG and you're consigning an item, come tell us about it. Talk about the item. I'm curious to learn more. And just who knows, maybe in a couple months, you'll see some new display pieces behind me that I acquired from Mark's LCG auction. So I want to invite everybody to come back Sunday. Mark, we're going live at 4:30 Eastern. We're going to do a quick Instagram live first too, as well, to try and wrangle a few more viewers and just hit up that audience. But then we're going to come over here again to Sports Cards Live. And then later on that day, I'll be covering hockey on the weekly hockey auctions on PWCC. So we're going to have some fun. You guys can follow LCG on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. It's coming up on the ticker right there at LCG Auctions. Mark is smart. He got the same handle on all platforms. So make sure you follow them there to keep up with this exciting area of collectibles. As we put on the thumbnail for this video, I think I put on there the most exciting collectibles that nobody knows about yet. And I mean, it is exciting. I'm pumped, man. I'm pumped. Are you excited for Sunday?
Super excited. Sunday is usually when, we'll see a lot of action and we'll see things probably change pretty drastically. So it's so fun to follow. I think there's going to be a lot of learning going on during our live, which is going to be very, very helpful to your viewers. Because someone like me, I didn't know what I was looking at, but we're going to break this stuff down, explain it, make it easy for you. Even if you don't bid or buy anything, that's okay. Come join us to learn, and you'll know what you're looking at for the next one. And buy one at some point, see if you like it, and make a decision. They're really cool collectibles. I'm a sports card guy. I'm a memorabilia guy. But when I saw this stuff, I fell in love with it. And I think Jeremy may do the same. We'll see.
And if you come on, if you go to the LCG on Sunday and you buy an item and you decide it's not for you, Mark will happily, I'm sure, resell it for you again later, right? Yeah, man, I'm excited to do this. Oh, you mentioned the education piece. I want to talk about that briefly because we've actually, in planning for Sunday, I want everyone to know that we've actually come up with what we're calling these learning segments. So we're going to have, I forget how many we came up with, Mark, but at least 5 or 6 different real educational pieces that we're going to dive into to help people learn what it's like, collecting action figures, collecting these various types of pop culture items. We're going to be trying to educate as well. I'm excited for that because I'm going to soak it all up, and I hope that many of you guys do too. So with that, Mark, let's end this, and we will be back again on Sunday, again 4:30 Eastern. To you guys in the chat that were active tonight, thank you for that, and I recognize all of you, and that's great. It's nice to know I'm not the only card collector who also loves this this kind of stuff. This is a serious box filled with Star Wars figures, and I'm excited to maybe get into something that's more original or the early piece. That would be really cool. But again, thanks everyone for joining. If you want to put any final comments in the chat, that'd be great. Thank you, Vintage Card Collector. Happy to have you here as always. Mark, thanks to you for making the time tonight. And of course, we'll see you again on Sunday. And final words to you, and then we're going to end this.
Thank you for having me on. I was very much looking forward to coming on and talking to you. I was turned on when I saw you describe cards in a certain way through the PWCC premiere, how you talked about the registration and whatnot, and things that I kind of would gloss over. I thought that now that's a real collector there. And you would talk about the character of the card, how the star maybe shouldn't be perfect centering. That's not how it's meant to be. All that kind of stuff appealed to me, and I wanted to reach out and thank you for accepting me and bringing me in for this. Yeah, no,
I love what you're doing. I love the subject matter. I love the pop culture. It's nostalgic for me. So it's hey man, the feeling's mutual. I'm excited about doing this with you. And I hope we have a successful show on Sunday. I hope you have a successful auction. And with that, everybody, back tomorrow night, Sports Cards Live. with my guest. We are going to be talking about the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle that he traded for at the Burbank Card Show last weekend, and then Sunday again back here with Mark. That is Matthew Rocker tomorrow night. He is 1956 Topps Guy on Instagram. And with that, until tomorrow night, everybody, thank you for joining. And this episode is now over.